Again, welcome. We've been sort of trickling in, but that's typical for St. Mary's, so welcome. I'm going to do, the announcements I talked about the break-in, but since this is now being done for YouTube, I've got to back up a little and do a very short background to the sermon for this morning. For those of you who don't know this already, Christmas Eve we locked up as we normally do. We were out of here by between 8:30 and 8:45. Later the police were to ask, was the door locked? Yes, the door was locked. Tom had taken home the Christmas offering, and sometime between 9 and 12, somebody broke in through a window in the lounge. Didn't do an incredible amount of damage, but banged in the door to my office, banged in the door to the main office. The doors are fine. The frames, on the other hand, will need serious work. There was none of the sort of church regular money to be had. It was already out of here. But one of the sad things is, 2 days before we had our Christmas concert to raise money for the sponsoring of the refugee family, that money and some other cash was in my desk drawer. It's interesting, they took the big envelope, which had refugee family written on it, so maybe at some point conscience will twig, but I highly doubt it. There were some other little bits of money around. They also took a set of billiard balls from my office. I have no idea what they're going to do with them, but presumably something. So we were broken into on Christmas Eve, and just ironically, Mer had said to Min, as we were closing up, it's Christmas Eve, nobody's going to break in on Christmas Eve, and for the first time since the last break-in, we actually left the laptop and the data projector where they were, knowing we were going to be back here in less than 12 hours. So they were gone too. Fortunately, Rich is here this morning, obviously an act of divine providence, which means we will get another laptop thanks to you, Rich. I want to talk about this a little bit, not the break-in per se. That was just the background for people that might pick this up on YouTube. But I want to talk about the significance of this and theology. Our theology as we deal with things like this, like break-ins, like bad stuff that happens. It is the Sunday after Christmas. Custom is that our service is a little bit shorter, so it will be. The danger in changing your sermon is that it takes more time to do a short sermon than it does to do a long sermon. So if lack of preparation leads to extra length, my apologies in advance. I want to start in what might sound like a funny place, and I don't mean to get weird here, but it may sound a little weird until you hear this part through to the end. I don't know if any of you have recurring dreams. I have recurring dreams. A couple, not very many, but two in particular that relate to church. And I'm not suggesting here any prophetic gift or any divine insight or anything. They're just recurring dreams, and they relate basically to what I do for a living. One of them takes place in some downtown area somewhere in some city. It's our climate, it's our environment, it's our culture. But it's usually 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. The bars are closing down. Teenagers, young adults are totally trashed and wasted, finding their way from one place to another, after party and all the rest of that sort of stuff. And there's a storefront that one of the clergy in the diocese, he's always in the dream, Nick Brotherwood, has converted into a church. And this, by the way, this is not real. Okay, this is a dream. Okay, just so that you get that. Okay, I don't want Nick calling me up saying, "What's this about a church I started?" So who knows? Maybe he will. But it's in a very down at its heels part of town, and the dream is full of like darkness. It's cloying. There's a lot of grunge to the dream, and in the dream, the theme of the dream is how do you introduce hope in a context like that? And I don't need to go through all the details or anything like that, and the details vary, but basically that's the theme. How do you introduce hope in that type of environment? The other type of dream that I have, and this one I had last night, again, there's variations on a theme. The one that I had last night, and there wasn't really a start of it, I sort of found myself in what was an old parking lot. It was just like an abandoned parking lot, where the weeds come up through the cracks and there's just garbage everywhere. And it was in an old industrial area, all the buildings abandoned and graffitied and all the rest of it. Very few people around. Just a lot of dirt and crud and abandoned. But there was a church there. And I don't know why, but in this dream, I was particularly aware that it was a Presbyterian church for some reason. You know how dreams are, they're strange, and there's not to indict a Presbyterian church in any way, shape, or form. But it was a church plunked in the middle of this abandoned, neglected, messed up industrial area that had been totally just let go. And there was a minister there, a woman minister, and who was constantly trying to keep this church going. And there were very few residents in the area, and the residents that lived in the area did not have the means to fix up the church. The windows were all broken. There was a surprise. It was dirty inside. It was smelly. The plumbing didn't really work. Sound familiar to some of you? And it was just a grungy mess, you know. And in there, the thing that struck me in the dream, and that I could sort of elaborate on it, was the first thing that has to happen here is you've got to throw out the garbage. There was garbage all over the church. The sanctuary area didn't look like a sanctuary anymore. It looked like a rummage sale had taken place over a course of years and nobody had ever cleaned up the garbage. The kitchen was disgusting, and the bathrooms were disgusting. And there were all sorts of little rooms, and you know, the paint was peeling off the walls and all the rest of that. And the first thing that had to be done was, before anything positive can happen here, you've got to clean out the garbage, you know. And then I woke up. There's more to that dream. There's more to that dream. And I don't know what the more is on this particular occasion. But those are two themes that I want to speak to this morning. One is the theme of how do you bring hope in darkness, and what's the garbage that needs to be thrown out before the church or the kingdom of God can thrive. And that's what I want to talk about this morning in the context of our break-in and in the context of the future of the parish as well, because quite apart from the break-ins that we've had this past year, two of them, our parish, like lots of parishes, really needs to look at our identity and our mission and what we're called to be. Some of that will necessitate throwing out some garbage. Some of it will necessitate cleaning up and sprucing up. And some of it will be the rediscovery of treasure. And it's in that context that hope comes. Now, I want to say this, and please don't take offense, and please do hear it in the same way that I mean it. But a break-in, even when you lose money, provides an opportunity. It does provide an opportunity for self-examination, whether it's individual or corporate. There is the feeling of ick, you know. When I lived in Mascouche, my house was broken into twice. And the first time, I called the insurance guy. He came and sat down. He asked what was missing. We did the settlement, did the sheet, and then he talked about when they come back. And I went, excuse me? He said, oh, no, that was just the first one. He said, they were casing the joint and taking a few things. They'll be back. And I said, oh, man. You know, well, I forget how many months later it was, but they did come back. And they cleaned me up good. You know, it was really quite something. And no matter what insurance settlement you get, and frankly on that occasion I did quite well in the insurance settlement, it leaves you with that feeling of ick, of darkness. You know, there's something sticky and cloying and acidy, burny and foul. It leaves you feeling really awful. It really leaves you feeling violated. Because you've been a victim of somebody else's wrong, of somebody else's greed, wherever that comes from, and whatever else is in their heart. You're a victim. You've been victimized. And for a church to be broken into, it feels the same way. Individually, for some of us who spend a lot of our time here, but also corporately. We've been violated. We feel victimized. And there are different reactions to the feeling of being victimized. There are some people who have lived a pattern of being victimized throughout their lives. And again, I don't want to go into this in any depth because it's not where I want to focus, but you sort of get used to being victimized. You know, you get sort of used to being beaten up, and your spirit gets smushed over time. And there's something over time that shrivels up and can even die inside. Another reaction to being victimized is the reaction of anger. And for those of you who are here Christmas morning, you could doze through this part, it's not very long. You get angry, and rightly so. Anger at injustice is not an inappropriate thing. whether it's in our individual lives, in the way we've been treated by individuals or systems or structures, or in our corporate life, when we're victimized, when we're used, abused, mistreated, violated in some way, to feel angry about that is quite healthy and appropriate. And if I could do just one biblical cross-reference right here, one biblical reference here, just think of Jesus in the temple, the incarnate Word of God. And when he walked into the temple and saw that it had been turned into basically a rummage sale, he, as God incarnate, felt violated, and his response was anger. And anyone that thinks Jesus went up and down the aisles between the tables saying, "Silly boys," that is not what it was like. It was aggressive. It was even violent. And sometimes people don't want to look at that side of Jesus, but it was. And so to feel a real depth of passion when we feel violated or victimized or used or abused or mistreated is not unhealthy or inappropriate unless we stay there. And so the image that I used on Christmas Day to describe this as, when you feel violated, your reaction is a clenched fist. It's to tighten up and to clench up. At a certain point, it has to open. Because this will kill you. This will affect your body. This will affect your spirit. This will affect your emotions if you stay like this. Because it gets worse and tighter over time. And you find that you spend your life protecting yourself from dangers and harms imagined as well as the real ones. So we've got to move beyond them. And as a congregation, as a Christian community, we have to, yes, experience the anger and the sense of violation and own it, but move beyond it. Because if we turn the church into a fortress, well, the kingdom of God is not a fortress, folks. It is not a fortress where we stand on the battlements and look out at all the forces of darkness out there and say, "Ha! We're safe!" That's not what church is supposed to be. Church is supposed to be what, if I may be so bold, and again, I claim no prophetic insight here at all, what those two dreams that I referred to are about. About hope in hopelessness. It's about light going into those areas where things are sticky and smelly and cloying and dirty. It's to be light. It's supposed to be a beacon in the midst of the desert, the oasis, the garbage dumps, the refuge. That's where we're called to be. And that's where we are called to proclaim the message of God's love and His hope for the world. That's what it's about. So, as a catalyst to thinking, we could legitimately ask the question, what does a break-in say to us about where we're living, the times we're living in, and what our mission statement, our mission call is, and then how do we respond to it? I want to just get very practical for a little bit here. Sometimes I will tell you that, and it doesn't happen so much anymore, but there were times in my life where I looked at some of the churches in our diocese, and indeed not only our diocese, but looked at some churches, and envied the glory of them. There's a church in our deanery that has a Cassaval organ that was made specially for it. They just spent a bundle of money refurbishing it. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous instrument. And while I believe for the times we're living in, what we're doing at our 10 o'clock service is appropriate for 10 o'clock while maintaining the 8:30 more traditional. There's a part of me that I just love that idiom, I grew up in a very traditional Anglican church that had beautiful stained glass windows, gorgeous stained glass windows. And sometimes I go to our cathedral or St. George's Place de Canada or St. John the Evangelist, and they're extremely different from suburban churches built in the 60s. And there's a part of me that feels, I'm not sure whether it goes as far as jealousy, but there's something in there that, oh man, there's something so nice. And I've done communion services with solid silver chalices. I think once I did a communion service with a solid gold chalice. I think it was solid gold, but it might have been plate. I think it was solid gold with semi-precious jewels all around. And I gotta tell you, when you do communion with that, there's just something about it. Maybe it's appealing to a side of me that I should be repenting of, but there's something about the glory that it means something on some level. And I look at St. Mary's, and I look around, and we have, and don't jump on me here, because I'm going to say something different in a minute. We have no treasures. You know, we just don't have stuff that's worth a fortune. You know, our building is worth a certain amount, insurance settlement if the place was to burn down, but it never would burn down because the roofs are so wet it couldn't catch fire. You know? But when somebody breaks into steal, there's very little of value to steal. And when somebody vandalizes, and that's really what's happened in terms of damage and destruction, mostly since I've been here, people throwing rocks through windows. They're not breaking stained glass window treasures. They're just breaking glass. I would say, quite personally, and I'm not suggesting that everybody should be of this opinion with me, but it's a personal opinion, that the biggest treasure that we have in this church is our bangers. Try fencing them on eBay or something. You won't get much. But to me, those are our biggest treasure. They were made by, the job was led by a parishioner here, and made by parishioners here. They tell the Christian story. And when I arrived at St. Mary's, the orientation of the church is very different in those days. There was one on the wall, and I can't see it right now. But anyway, it's the one with the flowers. Some of you might remember it.
It's in the other room.
It's in the sacristy. That was the one on the wall. And then I thought it was nice. I thought it was really nice. And then Thanksgiving came. And the one with that one over in the corner there, the Thanksgiving one, the harvest one, appeared. And then Advent came, and the Advent candle one appeared. And so I said to the then altar guild head, who, if I remember right, was Shirley Cross at that point, I said, how many of these do you have? And she said, well, we've got them for every season. And I said, why aren't they up? And she said, because we've never been allowed. And I went, excuse me? And that's when I learned that the architectural design here, and if you look at the back of some radiators, you'll see that they're still battleship gray. The whole place was gray originally. The idea was that it was all of us that were supposed to be the color and the light and the glory of God in this place, and everything else was supposed to be simple, plain, and drab. And, well, I guess you could make a case for that if you wanted to, and were so inclined. What I did was I got out the 16-foot extension ladder in the days when I used to climb ladders, and I started installing rails. And those banners are up. Those banners tell the story. They tell the story of what we're about and where we come from and what we're here for. They are our treasure. Even though cash value, the other treasure, and this again is quite personal, in 1995 we had a horrible tragedy in this community. My predecessor and his wife, Frank and Jocelyn too, were murdered. It was a thrill pill. It was to see what it felt like to watch people die. 13, 14, and 15-year-olds did it. It was a horrible thing. I'd been on vacation. What cheap words to say? It was a horrible thing. How do you express that? I'd been on vacation the week before, and I had asked Frank, you know, sometimes, Frank had been here for almost 25 years, or maybe even a little more. Sometimes when your predecessor's been there for a long time, they got to stay far away, you know, because you've got to move on. Frank wasn't like that, and he and I got along well. I'd known him since I'd been ordained. And so I was really glad that our relationship was such that if I was to go away, Frank was first on my call-up list when he'd come and do a service. So the week before he died, the last place that Frank did communion this side of eternity was at St. Mary's Church. And frankly, I cherish that. But it was a horrible, horrible, horrible time. But in the midst of that, one of the things that happened was the then youth group collected a bunch of money, raised a bunch of money, and bought a chalice in memory of Frank and Jocelyn. And it's gold-plated, and around the stem is a depiction of the Last Supper. That's one of our treasures too. cash value, it's not worth an incredible amount of money. But that's one of our treasures too, because it speaks of who we are, and it speaks of our history, and it speaks of our story, and where we come from. And so it seems to me that as we live through the break-ins and declines in numbers and budget troubles and broken windows and heating systems and all the rest of it, all those things that, on the one hand, really do take a toll on your energy level and sometimes even on your spirit, at least for a little bit of time, we also need to step into our history and be reminded what the true treasures are here. And what the true treasures are here is God working His acts of grace through His people in this place. Whether it's making banners or youth group members processing their grief by raising money to buy a memorial to the priest who, in many cases, baptized them and had them confirmed. That's what our treasure is in this place. And it is anointing, and it is a pain, and yes, we are violated and victimized when we get broken into or vandalized, but that is not where it's going to be. It doesn't stay with a clenched fist. But what it does do is call each and every one of us, call each and every one of us to look at ourselves and our own heart and our own soul and our own spirit and ask ourselves the question, in the reality of the world that we find ourselves living in and the environment we find ourselves living in, which can cause all these things, it does cause all these things, how is God causing me to be a light in the world? You know, sermons are funny things. When I did my sermon on Christmas Eve, again, that was a sermon that I changed because of what had happened in Connecticut. And for those of you that weren't here, closed the curtains, made it as dark in here as is possible, put out all the candles, and I asked that just one candle be lit on the Advent wreath. We did get one candle lit, Ellen, it's all right, it just didn't happen to be the white one, but that's okay. And really, it was a bit of a surprise how even with one little candle in this place, when it was lit, you could start to see shadows and shapes. And then I started talking about the various ministries that are going on in and through this church. Not a comprehensive list, we would have been here till New Year's. There wouldn't have been a break-in, we would still be here. But talking about some of the things that we've done, some of the things that we continue to do to be God's light in the world. And what I'd sort of rigged was that people would come up and light their candle from that candle and bring it back to their place. As the candles were brought back, you know what happens. The light gets brighter, and the shadows get exposed. What's hiding in the darkness gets exposed. Like when you move your dresser away from the wall after 3 years, everything that's under there gets exposed. And the light shines in the darkness and exposes what's in the darkness. The other thing that happens is, when the darkness is banished, you start to be able to see color. When there isn't too much light, all we see is black and white. But the more light there is, the more color you see. And as Christians called to serve and witness in the world, one of the things that we discover is, the more our light shines, the more we discover that God's light is already shining and active in the world. So, once again, we have had to replace our data projector. We will thankfully have another laptop, which shall be removed at the end of each service, and even next Christmas Eve. We're not going to replace the billiard balls that were stolen, but the money will be replaced. And so here's what we're going to do, folks. To take darkness and begin the process of transforming into light. I've called most of the people, or spoken to most of the people who were involved in the concert on the 23rd. The concert that we put together to raise money to sponsor a mom and a dad and a 24-year-old son who are presently surviving, we hope, in Damascus, to be reunited with their daughter and her children in Halifax. That was our commitment. The money was stolen. The concert raised money that was, I'm speaking in a confused way, sorry about that, but you get what I'm saying. We're going to have another concert, and we're going to have it on January 20th. And it's going to be called take 2. And all the musicians that I've spoken to so far have said that they're up for that. It'll be at 3 o'clock, not 2 o'clock, because I'm going to do whatever I can do to publicize this far and wide. Tomorrow, I'm going to leave a message with the CBC Daybreak folk. Mike, whatever his last name is, sorry Mike, interviewed me in the spring when we had our first break-in. I'm going to leave a very intriguing, I hope, message on his answering machine saying, well, we're going into once and guess what? And I'm going to describe a little bit, but just enough to be a teaser, and hope he calls me back. I'm going to call Jill Deacon, and I'm going to call somebody, she's global, right? I'm going to call CTV as well. I'm going to call the Chronicle, and I'm going to re-hook up with somebody who I met at a party last year who is a reporter for Suburban as well. And I'm going to talk about a concert. And I'm going to talk about how our youth group years ago, starting with 3 years ago now, raised enough money with a group of people from another church to bring over a refugee family. And at the end there was money left over. And we found out by donating that money about this situation where there's the desire to reunite the family. And the youth group has worked very hard to raise that money. And that money was stolen. Not all of it, but a percentage of that money was stolen. And we are going to do another concert, take 2, to continue the process of raising money and hopefully to finish off. So not only will we be a light to the family in reuniting them, but hopefully a light to the community as well. That when you're victimized, when you're violated, when you've been abused, when you're hurt, you can either hunker down, cloister in, and barricade yourself, or you can say, no, that's not what we're about. That is not what we're about. We're about being light. And though hurt, though wounded, though angry, we will move beyond that and remember our purpose to be light in a world where there is a lot of shadow and darkness. We will accomplish the goals that God sets for us just as surely as He will accomplish His kingdom purposes. So, when you go home today, take out your brand new 2013 calendar. January 20th, put a red, green, yellow, blue circle around it, whatever, 3 o'clock St. Mary's. Ticket price is going to be the same. However, people who choose to donate more, that'll be most welcome as well. And we'll see. We'll see just what we can do to be God's light shining in the darkness. So that's it for this morning. Let's sing another song. Let's sing an up, joyful, spirit-raising, happy